After Mark found out about Sarah's wife's cheating with her boss Jacob, he decided to take revenge. Instead of wallowing in anger, he planned a cunning plan of revenge. Under the guise of a new client, he began work in Jacob's company. Mark was slowly destroying Jacob's career, adjusting failures and pointing out his mistakes. Soon Jacob lost his position, and Sarah, having learned about revenge, lost hope for their salvation. Mark left the garden, leaving Sarah and Jacob in the ruins. Satisfied that he restored his justice, I came home a bit earlier than usual, lilies in hand, ready to surprise Sarah. As I stepped inside, the house felt strangely quiet, almost unnaturally so. I walked toward the stairs, and that's when I heard it, muffled laughter coming from the bedroom. My heart pounded as I crept up the stairs. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and there they were, Sarah and Jacob, her boss, tangled in each other. They didn't see me. I didn't make a sound. I simply turned around, walked back down the stairs, and left the house. Sitting in my car, I knew what had to be done. No confrontation, no tears, just a plan. They wouldn't see it coming. The next day, I began working on my plan. There was no time to waste. I spent the morning researching Jacob's company, finding every piece of information I could about their operations, key players, and most importantly, Jacob's role in it all. By afternoon, I had what I needed. I created a new identity, Mark Daniels, a successful entrepreneur looking to expand his business. I knew Jacob would be eager to land a client like that. I made a few calls and set up a meeting with Jacob's firm, and within days, I was sitting across from him in his office. He had no idea who I was. He smiled, shook my hand, and eagerly pitched me his company's services. I played my part perfectly, interested, but cautious. I asked the right questions, pretended to consider his proposals, and let him believe he was winning me over. I could see the hunger in his eyes, the desperation to close the deal and impress his superiors. Over the next few weeks, I became his most promising client. I requested detailed reports, scheduled meetings, and gave him impossible deadlines, all while dropping subtle hints that I wasn't fully convinced. I made him jump through hoops, watching him struggle to keep up. But this was just the beginning. The real damage was yet to come. As I gained his trust, I started planting seeds of doubt and confusion in his mind. I hinted at issues with the numbers and suggested that certain deals might not be as profitable as they seemed. I could see the cracks forming, the stress starting to weigh on him. He began making mistakes, small ones at first, but they started to add up. Missed details, miscalculations, and soon enough, his reputation within the company was taking a hit. The higher-ups were starting to notice. And all the while, Sarah had no idea. She continued her life as if nothing had changed, oblivious to the storm brewing around her lover. But it wouldn't be long before the fallout reached her as well. The first phase of my plan was complete. Jacob was on the edge, and soon, I would push him over. With Jacob teetering on the brink, it was time to escalate. I shifted my approach, making my moves more calculated and precise. I began feeding him false information, subtle errors in financial reports, misleading projections, and flawed advice. He trusted me completely by this point, relying on my expertise to guide his decisions. I watched as he unknowingly sabotaged his work. Each mistake he made snowballed, causing more issues within the company. Projects were delayed, profits dipped, and clients began to lose confidence. I could see the panic in his eyes every time we met. He was desperate, scrambling to fix problems he didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, I made sure his superiors were aware of his declining performance. I would casually mention in our meetings how certain aspects of the project seemed off, and how some numbers didn't quite add up. It wasn't long before they started questioning his competence. Jacob's stress levels were skyrocketing. He started making more obvious mistakes, missing deadlines, miscommunicating with clients, and even showing up late to important meetings. The once confident man who had everything under control was unraveling before my eyes. It didn't take long for the company to start distancing itself from him. He was quietly removed from key projects. His responsibilities were reduced. The higher-ups began discussing his future, and it wasn't looking good. I took a certain satisfaction in watching it all unfold. Every time Jacob looked at me with that desperate, pleading expression, I knew my plan was working. He had no idea that the person he was leaning on was the one pulling the strings. But I wasn't done yet. There was one final move to make, one that would ensure Jacob's complete downfall. And when it happened, there would be no coming back for him. With Jacob hanging by a thread, it was time to deliver the final blow. I had been patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Now, everything was in place. All I needed was the right opportunity. I scheduled one last meeting, under the pretense of discussing a major investment opportunity. Jacob was eager, desperate to secure what he thought would be his ticket back into the company's good graces. He didn't realize that this meeting would be his undoing. I presented him with a proposal, a high-stakes deal that promised huge returns. But only if executed flawlessly. The catch? It required significant upfront investment and meticulous planning. Jacob didn't hesitate. He saw this as his chance to redeem himself. He agreed without fully understanding the risks involved. Over the next few days, I fed him detailed instructions on how to proceed, each step designed to lead him further into a trap. I advised him to pull resources from other projects, to shift company funds into this surefire deal. He did everything I suggested, trusting me completely. But the deal was a setup. The moment Jacob committed, the whole thing collapsed. The investments vanished, the partners I'd introduced him to suddenly went silent, and the company was left with a massive financial hole. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Jacob was called into an emergency meeting with the board. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. I knew exactly how it would play out. He would be confronted with the losses, the mismanagement, and the sheer recklessness of his decisions. There would be no defense, no excuse that could save him. By the end of the day, Jacob was done. He was escorted out of the building, his career in shambles, and his reputation ruined. The company lost millions, and he was the one held responsible. That evening, I watched from a distance as Jacob walked out of the office for the last time. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale with shock. The confident, ambitious man who had everything was now a broken shell. As for Sarah, she would soon learn of Jacob's downfall. And when she did, she would realize that it was all tied back to me. The man she had betrayed had quietly and methodically destroyed the life she had chosen over ours. I had accomplished what I set out to do. Jacob was finished, and Sarah would be left with nothing but the ruins of the life she'd traded me for. My revenge was complete. The news of Jacob's downfall spread quickly. The once revered executive was now a cautionary tale, whispered about in the hallways and boardrooms. But for Sarah, the truth hit even harder. She came home that evening, her face pale, the weight of the day evident in her eyes. I was already there, waiting. I watched her as she entered the house, the tension in the air palpable. She tried to act like everything was normal, but I could see through her. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know the full extent yet. Finally, she turned to me, her voice trembling. "Mark, something terrible has happened at Jacob's company. He's lost everything. They're saying he might never work in this industry again." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I heard. She looked at me, searching my face for some sign of sympathy, some hint of comfort. But there was none. The realization began to dawn on her, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together. "Did you have anything to do with this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to feel the weight of the silence, to understand the gravity of what she was asking. Then, slowly, I stood up and walked toward her. "Everything Jacob lost," I began, my voice calm and measured, "he deserved. And yes, Sarah, I made sure he got exactly what was coming to him. Her eyes widened in shock, horror mixing with disbelief. Why? Why would you do this? Because, I replied, you both took everything from me. My trust, my love, my life, and you thought you could just move on as if nothing happened. But there are consequences, Sarah. And now, you're going to live with them. She took a step back, tears welling up in her eyes. Mark, I never meant for any of this to happen. I was wrong, I know that now. It's too late for that, I said coldly. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. Jacob's career is over, and you're left with nothing. Just like I was. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing, but I didn't comfort her. There was no sympathy left in me for the woman who had betrayed me. My revenge was complete, and there was nothing left to say. I turned and walked out of the house, leaving her there, alone with her guilt and her tears. As I stepped outside, the night air felt cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the storm that had just erupted inside. I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me there. I had done what I set out to do, and now it was time to move on. The chapter of my life with Sarah was over, and with it, so was any trace of the man I used to be. With Sarah's world in ruins and Jacob's career destroyed, I knew it was time to leave. There was no point in lingering. I had achieved what I set out to do, and staying would only complicate things further. My presence would only serve as a reminder of the chaos I'd created. I packed a few essentials, clothes, a few personal items, and a suitcase full of memories I had no intention of revisiting. I moved quickly and quietly, not wanting to give Sarah or anyone else a chance to stop me. The house felt empty, devoid of the warmth and familiarity it once had. As I finished packing the last of my things, I glanced around the house one final time. The life I had built here with Sarah was now a distant memory, overshadowed by the betrayal and revenge that had driven me to this point. There was nothing left for me here. I walked out the front door, the cool evening air hitting me as I headed towards my car. The city lights were just starting to flicker on, casting a faint glow over the streets. I took one last look at the house, then drove away, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. The road ahead was open, and I had no specific destination in mind. I drove through the night, the miles stretching out before me. Each passing town and city was a step further away from the life I was leaving behind. I didn't have a plan, just a need to put as much distance as possible between myself and the wreckage of my past. In the days that followed, I found a small apartment in a different city. It was modest, nothing like the home I'd shared with Sarah. But it was mine. It was a new beginning, a place where I could start over without the baggage of my previous life. I settled in, finding solace in the routine of a new job and the anonymity of a fresh start. The memories of Sarah and Jacob faded into the background, replaced by the simple, mundane tasks of rebuilding my life. Looking back, I felt a sense of closure. I had taken control of my fate, and though the path had been dark and twisted, I had navigated it with purpose. There was no more anger or bitterness. Just the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. As I walked through the streets of my new city, I realized that I had finally moved on. The chapter with Sarah and Jacob was closed, and I was ready to face whatever came next, unburdened by the past. The phone call from Greg Turner, Jacob's lawyer, caught me off guard. I hadn't anticipated any further repercussions, but the urgency in his voice was undeniable. "Mark Daniels?" he asked. "That's right," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk about the recent developments involving Jacob and Sarah. Could you come to our office tomorrow?" I felt a pang of anxiety. "What's this about?" "It's a legal matter," Turner said. "It's important we discuss this in person." I agreed to the meeting, though I wasn't sure what to expect. The next day, I found myself walking into the law firm's sleek, modern building, my nerves on edge. Turner greeted me with a firm handshake and led me into a conference room. "Please, have a seat," he said, motioning to a chair across from his desk. I sat down, trying to gauge his demeanor. He seemed professional, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the room. Mr. Daniels, Turner began. As you're aware, Jacob's downfall has been highly publicized. What you might not know is that he and Sarah have been pursuing legal action against each other, citing emotional distress and financial damages. I nodded, bracing myself. And how does this involve me? Jacob and Sarah have both pointed fingers. Turner explained. Jacob claims that he was manipulated and deceived by a mystery client, you. Sarah, on the other hand, has implicated you as well, suggesting you were part of a scheme to ruin Jacob. My mind raced. I hadn't anticipated that my actions would come back to me in this way. What do they want from me? They're looking for answers, Turner said. Specifically, they want to know if you had any involvement beyond what has been publicly disclosed. If we can establish that you acted with malicious intent, it could complicate things for you legally. I felt a mix of frustration and resignation. I had acted to get my revenge, but I had not planned for legal consequences. What are my options? Turner leaned forward. You can choose to cooperate with us, providing a statement about your involvement. Alternatively, you can refuse, but that may lead to further legal complications. I weighed my options. On one hand, cooperating might mitigate any potential fallout. On the other, I wanted to remain as far removed from this mess as possible. I'll cooperate, I said finally. But I want to be sure that this stays confidential. I don't want any more drama. Turner agreed to maintain confidentiality and arranged for me to provide a statement in a controlled manner. As I left the office, I couldn't shake the feeling that my past was catching up to me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I had managed to exact my revenge, but now I faced a new challenge, one that required careful navigation. The consequences of my actions were unfolding in unexpected ways, and I had to deal with them carefully to ensure my new life remained intact. The following weeks were tense and fraught with uncertainty. I worked closely with Greg Turner, providing a detailed account of my involvement in Jacob's downfall. My goal was clear: to protect myself from any potential legal repercussions while minimizing my exposure to the public eye. Turner handled the situation with professionalism, keeping the discussions discreet and focused. He assured me that my cooperation would be kept confidential, and we prepared a statement outlining the facts of my involvement. I was careful to emphasize that my actions were motivated by personal reasons and were executed within legal boundaries. Despite my efforts to keep things under control, the legal proceedings were intense. Jacob and Sarah's lawyers were determined to paint a picture of manipulation and deceit. They argued that I had maliciously engineered Jacob's downfall, while I maintained that my actions were a personal vendetta and not a criminal scheme. The hearings were stressful. I appeared in court to provide my testimony, facing questions that probed the extent of my involvement and the nature of my intentions. Jacob and Sarah were present, their faces etched with anger and frustration. The courtroom atmosphere was charged. Jacob looked worn and defeated, while Sarah's eyes betrayed a mixture of regret and bitterness. I tried to remain composed, focusing on the facts and avoiding any emotional displays. In the end, the court's ruling was mixed. While I wasn't found guilty of any criminal wrongdoing, the judge acknowledged that my actions had significant negative consequences for Jacob and Sarah. I was ordered to pay a modest financial settlement to cover some of the damages caused by the fallout, but the amount was manageable. As I left the courthouse, I felt a sense of relief. The legal battle had taken its toll, but it was over. The most important thing was that I had managed to avoid any serious charges and had protected my new life from further disruption. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding and moving forward. The legal troubles were a stark reminder of the complexity and unpredictability of revenge. I had achieved my goal, but the cost was higher than I had anticipated. Sarah and Jacob remained a part of my past, their presence a distant echo. I continued with my new routine, settling into a quieter, more peaceful existence. The drama and turmoil of the past were behind me, and as I looked ahead, I was determined to make the most of the fresh start I had fought so hard to create. Months passed since the court case, and life had slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. My new apartment had become a comfortable refuge, and my job was stable. I found solace in the routine of daily life, embracing the simplicity and anonymity that came with starting over. One morning, as I sipped coffee and read the newspaper, I noticed an article about Jacob. He had been trying to rebuild his career but was facing significant challenges. The piece detailed his struggle to find stable work and his efforts to clear his name. It struck me that he was still grappling with the fallout of his downfall, a reminder of how thoroughly my plan had succeeded. Sarah's name hadn't appeared in the news for a while, but I assumed she was dealing with the aftermath of her choices. She had faced public scrutiny and personal loss, and though I felt a twinge of regret, I knew I had done what I felt was necessary. The consequences of her actions had come full circle. I continued to focus on my new life, finding comfort in my job and the few friendships I'd begun to build. It wasn't glamorous or extraordinary, but it was peaceful. I relished the absence of the chaos that had once dominated my life. One day, while walking through a local park, I ran into an old acquaintance from college. We caught up, and I shared a little about my recent move and the new chapter in my life. It was refreshing to talk about the present and the future, rather than the past. As I walked away from our conversation, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The past was behind me, and I was forging a path forward. The fresh start I had fought for was becoming a reality, and I was determined to make the most of it. In this new phase of my life, I embraced the ordinary moments and small victories. I found satisfaction in the stability and quietude I had sought. The revenge that had once consumed me was now a distant memory, and I looked ahead with a sense of peace and anticipation for whatever came next. This was my new beginning. The past had shaped me, but it no longer defined my future. I was ready to move forward. To live a life unburdened by the shadows of what had once been. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when the unexpected happened. I had been enjoying the tranquility of my new routine, but life has a way of throwing surprises when you least expect them. I decided to visit a local bookstore, a favorite pastime that allowed me to lose myself in a world of fiction and escape from reality. As I browsed through the aisles, my thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Mark?" I turned to see a woman approaching me with an uncertain smile. It took me a moment to place her, but then it hit me. It was Julia, an old college friend. We had lost touch over the years, and her sudden appearance was both surprising and unsettling. "Julia. It's been a long time," I said, trying to sound more enthusiastic than I felt. She gave me a warm hug, and we moved to a nearby cafe to catch up. Over coffee, Julia filled me in on her life, and I did the same. We talked about our careers, our personal lives, and the changes that have happened since college. As the conversation flowed, I found myself gradually relaxing and enjoying her company. But as we spoke, Julia dropped a bombshell. "I heard about your legal issues last year," she said. "I saw the news and wondered how you were doing. I hope you're all right." I tensed, unsure of how to respond. "I'm doing fine. It was a difficult period, but it's behind me now." Julia looked at me with concern. "I hope you know that not everyone saw it the way the media portrayed it. I've heard from mutual friends who said you were just caught in a tough situation." Her words were a small comfort, though they did little to change the past. I appreciated her support but felt a pang of discomfort. The past was something I wanted to keep buried, but here it was being unearthed by an old friend. We spent a few more hours together, discussing lighter topics and sharing memories of our college days. When we parted ways, Julia gave me a reassuring hug. "It was really good to see you, Mark. If you ever need someone to talk to or just want to catch up, don't hesitate to reach out." I watched her leave, feeling a mix of relief and unease. It was strange how the past could still reach out to you in unexpected ways, even when you thought you had moved on. As I left the bookstore and walked back to my apartment, I reflected on the encounter. Life had a way of intersecting with our pasts, no matter how much we tried to leave them behind. I was grateful for the support and the reminder that despite everything, I still had people who cared about me. The unexpected meeting with Julia was a reminder that while I had closed one chapter of my life, there were still connections and moments that bridged the gap between who I was and who I was becoming. It was a comforting thought as I continued to build my new life, one day at a time. As winter settled in, life continued at its steady pace. The city was covered in a blanket of snow, and I found solace in the quiet beauty of the season. The routine of my new life was comforting, though occasionally, I would reflect on the ripples my actions had caused. One evening, I was finishing up some work when I received a letter. It was from an old college professor, Dr. Lewis, who had been a mentor to me years ago. I hadn't heard from him in ages, so the letter's arrival was unexpected. The letter contained an invitation to a reunion event at the university. Dr. Lewis wanted me to attend and share my experiences since graduation. He wrote about how he had followed my career with interest and was eager to reconnect. Despite my initial hesitation, I decided to go. It felt like a chance to reconnect with my past in a way that was positive and forward-looking. I arrived at the campus, feeling a mix of nostalgia and apprehension. The reunion was a blend of old friends, faculty, and new faces. As I mingled, I encountered a few familiar faces from my past. Conversations were warm and engaging, but I noticed that a few people were curious about the recent events involving me. I did my best to keep things vague, focusing on the positives of my current life. During the evening, I had a chance to speak with Dr. Lewis. We talked about my career and the challenges I had faced. I chose to be honest but brief about the legal issues, framing them as a difficult period of personal growth. Dr. Lewis listened attentively and then offered words of wisdom. Sometimes, the choices we make have far-reaching effects, Mark. It's how we respond to those effects that define us. His words resonated with me. I realized that despite the tumultuous period I had endured, I had the opportunity to shape my future and respond to the past with grace. As the night wound down, I was approached by a former classmate, Lisa, who had been a close friend during college. We had lost touch over the years, and her presence was a pleasant surprise. "Mark, it's great to see you," she said, giving me a warm hug. "I heard about what happened, and I just wanted to say that I'm really glad to see you here. It seems like you're doing well." Her support was genuine, and it felt good to reconnect with someone who had known me before the recent chaos. We spent the rest of the evening catching up, sharing stories and memories, and discussing our lives since graduation. The reunion ended on a positive note, and as I left the campus, I felt a renewed sense of closure. The ripples of my past had not only affected others but had also shaped my journey. Yet, reconnecting with old friends and mentors reminded me that despite the turbulence, there was still a path forward. Returning to my apartment, I reflected on the evening. The past had cast long shadows, but it no longer defined me. Instead, I was moving forward with a greater understanding of how to navigate life's complexities. The reunion had been a reminder that while the effects of our actions can be profound, we have the power to shape our responses and build new connections. It was a comforting realization as I continued to embrace my new beginning. The city was alive with the colors of spring, so I decided to spend a Saturday afternoon at a new art gallery downtown. I was absorbed in a modern abstract piece when I noticed a familiar figure standing nearby. It was Sarah. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated but then approached her. "Sarah?" She turned, her eyes widening. "Mark. I didn't expect to see you here." We decided to move to a nearby cafe for a quieter conversation. As we sat down, Sarah looked nervous. "I'm sorry for how everything ended. I've been trying to make things right in my life." I nodded. "I appreciate that. It's been a while." Sarah talked about her new job and how she had been struggling to rebuild after the public fallout. She spoke honestly about the difficulties she faced and her regrets. "I've been trying to get my life back on track," she said. "I just wanted to apologize for everything." I replied, "Thank you. It's good to hear you're working on things." We talked about our current lives, avoiding the details of the past. Sarah mentioned she was adjusting to her new role and finding some stability. I shared how I had settled into a new routine and found peace in my current situation. After about an hour, we finished our coffee. Sarah stood up. "It was good to see you, Mark. I hope things continue to go well for you." "You too, Sarah," I said as we parted ways. As I walked back through the city streets, I felt a sense of closure. Seeing Sarah was unexpected but straightforward. It was clear that we both had moved on, and I was ready to keep focusing on my new life. As summer approached, I found myself feeling more settled than ever in my new life. The city was buzzing with activity, and I had embraced the change of pace, enjoying the simple pleasures that came with it. One day, while I was taking a walk in the park near my apartment, I bumped into an old friend from my college days, Tom. We hadn't seen each other in years, and his unexpected appearance was a pleasant surprise. "Mark, I didn't expect to run into you here," Tom said with a grin. "Tom, it's great to see you," I replied, shaking his hand. We decided to catch up over lunch at a nearby cafe. As we talked, Tom filled me in on his career and personal life. He was now working in a field related to environmental conservation, something he had always been passionate about. I shared the highlights of my journey, carefully omitting the more turbulent aspects but focusing on how I had found stability and contentment in my new routine. Tom was genuinely interested and supportive. "It sounds like you've turned things around." "I'm glad to hear it." Our conversation naturally flowed from old memories to current ambitions. Tom mentioned he was working on a new project that involved community outreach and environmental education. It was something he was excited about. And he invited me to get involved if I was interested. "I'd love to help out," I said, intrigued by the idea. We spent the afternoon discussing potential ways I could contribute, and by the end of our meeting, I felt energized and optimistic about the new opportunity. Tom's enthusiasm was infectious, and it was refreshing to think about contributing to something meaningful. As I walked home, I realized how much my life had changed. The past was behind me, and I was now looking forward to new opportunities. The chance to work on Tom's project was a chance to use my skills and time positively, aligning with the fresh start I had been seeking. The summer continued to unfold with new possibilities. I engaged in the environmental project, finding satisfaction in the work and the connections I was building. The balance of my new life felt complete, and the shadows of the past seemed to fade further away. With each passing day, it became clear that the future was filled with potential. I was embracing the present and looking forward to what lay ahead. The new horizons were bright, and I was ready to explore them with enthusiasm and hope. Summer was in full swing, and my involvement with Tom's environmental project had been both fulfilling and eye-opening. I was enjoying the work and the sense of purpose it provided, but I also began to reflect on my journey and where I was headed next. One evening, after a productive day at the project, I returned to my apartment and found myself thinking about the future. I had made significant strides in rebuilding my life. But I realized that I hadn't fully addressed my own goals and aspirations. I needed to decide what I wanted for the next phase of my life. To clear my mind, I took a walk to a nearby lake. The tranquil setting provided a moment of clarity. I thought about my career, my new interests, and the possibility of further personal growth. I had successfully moved past the chaos of the previous years, but now it was time to focus on what I wanted to achieve for myself. The next day, I met with Tom to discuss our progress on the project. During our conversation, I mentioned my thoughts about pursuing further education or a new career path. Tom was supportive and offered some advice based on his own experiences. "You've done a lot of self-reflection already," he said. "Think about what excites you and where you want to make an impact." The choices you make now can shape your future in a meaningful way. His words resonated with me. I had been focused on overcoming past challenges and contributing to the project, but I needed to align my actions with my long-term goals. After our discussion, I decided to research opportunities for further education and career development. I started exploring programs that would enhance my skills and open new doors. As summer continued, I began to apply to various programs and opportunities that aligned with my interests. The process was both exciting and nerve-wracking, but it felt like the right step toward shaping a future that was both fulfilling and purposeful. The decisions I made during this period were crucial. They represented not just a continuation of my journey, but a new chapter that I was eager to embrace. I had moved past the shadows of the past and was now stepping into a future that held promise and potential. With each application I submitted and each opportunity I explored, I felt a growing sense of anticipation. The path ahead was still uncertain, but it was mine to shape. I was ready to face whatever came next with confidence and optimism. As autumn approached, I was deep into the application process for several educational and career opportunities. The research and preparation had been intense, but I was determined to make informed decisions that would shape my future. One crisp September morning, I received a call from a prestigious university where I had applied for a specialized program in environmental management. My heart raced as I answered. "Hello, Mark? This is Dr. Harper from the admissions office. I'm pleased to inform you that you've been accepted into our program." The news was a mix of relief and